My name is Era, and I'm the host of the Tamil Creator Podcast. I chat with creators from all over the world to share their stories and discuss hot topics in a way that I hope inspires, educates, and entertains you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tamil Creator. I'm your host, Era, and today I'm very excited to have Luxy Thuraisingam on the podcast. And for those of you that don't know her, she is a scientist, storyteller, and leader who sees the marketing landscape from fresh perspectives that have led to meeting emerging customer needs with unique solutions. So her most recent experiences include stints at some well-known brands, including Telus, CAA, BMO, and Rogers, along with being a marketing professor at York University, before she joined the Cisco team about 3 years ago, where she is now the head of global partner marketing. So Luxy, thank you so much for making time. I know you have a super busy schedule, so I appreciate that. And for me, I'm always excited to start at the beginning. So, let's start at the beginning in terms of like how you grew up, how does your family look, and just kind of go from there. And then we'll kind of go into your professional journey.
Well, first I want to say thank you, Ara, for having me on your podcast. And it's actually amazing and wonderful to see the impact you are having in showcasing diverse individuals in our community. So thank you for doing that. In terms of a little bit about myself from the beginning, I love that. I live here in Toronto, Canada, and my parents were both immigrants that came here. And like many immigrant parents, probably sacrificed a lot to come here to give my brother, I have a brother who's about 3 years younger than I, a better chance. I grew up in a fairly traditional home, I would say, where my parents had to persevere and, work really hard, laborious roles and jobs to get us, the life that we wanted, needed. And so I would say early on, perseverance and grit and hope were all kind of part of our story and part of our narrative.
That's amazing. The reason I always ask this question is I have always been super fascinated by things like birth order and kind of how you grew up, where you grew up, just things like that, because I feel like all those things can kind of impact your kind of trajectory from a young age. And now that I'm a relatively new parent, my wife and I had twins like about a year ago. I'm even more conscious of that fact as well. So thank you for kind of sharing that. So, you kind of talked about your upbringing, now you're kind of, for the last, number of years, you've been kind of in the world of marketing. So what specifically from a young age got you interested in this, world? And I feel like with marketing, it's like a word that's always thrown around, but I feel like people don't really know everything that it entails, because most people think it's predominantly qualitative, but there's a lot of quantitative aspects to it as well. So yeah, I would love to kind of hear about this.
So first I want to say congratulations on the twins, boy, girl, both.
One boy and one girl, yes.
Okay, so I have twins.
Wow.
Fun fact, and a boy and a girl, and they just turned 11. So you're in for some amazing experiences as a twin father. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, you know what? I'll start. Actually, it's funny, your question on what made me. Well, here's another interesting story. I was actually going to be a dentist when I grew up. So I didn't even know what marketing was. And so I was going to be a dentist. And I actually went to University of Toronto with a goal to pursue an honors BSc degree as an initial undergrad before pursuing the dental degree. And as I was, I would say almost halfway, I wasn't actually sure that I'd chosen the right path. I was just always one of those kids that was very good in, maths and sciences. And of course, coming from a traditional background, that was a bit of the path forward. And as I spent my time in university, especially, the truth is the reality of spending my days in a lab coat or looking into people's mouth was not something I wanted to do. And I also happened to have a fear of needles and blood, which I was clearly not going to get over. But I still, it was really important for me to finish and see my degree through. So I graduated and I was still a little bit of searching what to do next. And it was actually a friend of mine who encouraged me to investigate postgrad programs. And I've always been drawn to creative thinking and storytelling. And so a little bit on a whim, I took a course in international marketing and at a college. And the classes were intimate. And I got to learn some really amazing case studies, like how Coca-Cola sustained its brand for over 100 years, or how Zara, a retailer, successfully entered a very crowded space, or one that really stands with me is Steve Jobs' mission to disrupt the tech industry and capture a new generation. And I would say, long after the classes ended, I was still talking and thinking about the case studies to my friends and my family. And honestly, that's probably when I decided I was going to be a marketer. And the thing is, I love what I get to do for a living, and I'm so glad I chose a different path. I want to talk about your point on misconception, what people think, and you are 100% right. I still get a little bit of the, what do you really do, right? Like, what do you really do? Or on the other hand, people they assume it's very much in that advertising, TV, creative. And yes, all of that is true. And there was a point in my career where I did get to do some really amazing TV spots and radio ads. But I say today, it's actually more science, right? Especially in a digital age where data and analytics, and it's about getting the right message at the right time. There's actually a lot of science that goes into marketing as well.
No, definitely. I think people don't really understand that. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around kind of the relationship between sales and marketing as well,
Yeah.
because they kind of feed each other, right? Like the more sales and outreach you do with customers, that kind of feeds into the marketing loop as well. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think I saw as well that, something around the kind of the MBA program as well. And
Yeah.
I'm curious about your thought, because I also did my MBA and I have certain thoughts about it. What do you think the value of an MBA is in today's job market? Do you think it's something that will continue to be valuable, or has it been diluted with kind of how education is kind of evolving, and, especially with COVID impacting a lot of schools, and just kind of the trajectory of how education will be structured moving forward?
That's a pretty heavy question. I'll tell you from my perspective, right? For me, because my first degree was an honors BSc, personally pursuing an MBA was very important to me because it really complemented my science background. And to be honest, early in my career, it absolutely helped me differentiate between other candidates, because I actually had a very interesting combination of degrees. So I think people were interested, and it differentiated me, and it definitely led to some really great interview conversations and dialogue. Again, my opinion is I do think there's still value from an MBA perspective in the marketing environment. Now, that is obviously complemented and or not always needed, depending on which part of marketing you're going to go. If you're going to go very heavy in the technical space, in the digital space, you might not need it. But at the same time, if it's going to help you round out a degree, round out, other background that you have, I think it can certainly help you differentiate and show how you can be both a specialized, but also have broad business thinking. So it's also a little bit of, I think it's a combination of looking at your whole, what you have to offer, and is there an opportunity for an MBA to complement and differentiate.
So I guess if you're wearing your hiring hat and you're looking at potential candidates out there, does having an MBA make them stand out to you, or is it just kind of one piece of the puzzle of
It's
many
one
things you kind of?
piece. Absolutely. It's the combination, right? And there are lots of candidates I bring on that don't have an MBA. And they stand out for so many other reasons. And then there are candidates that, having that might make them interesting or unique, or again, depending on the rest of their background and what they specialize in. So I think it depends. I'm probably not answering. I'm not giving you a clear yes.
No. What you said makes sense. You kind of were talking about Steve Jobs, and it kind of got my mind going, because like one of my favorite, I guess, talks that Steve Jobs did was kind of, connecting the dots, looking backwards. Like everything makes sense when you look at all the dots that kind of came before where you are today. And for yourself, you're obviously in this very impressive role at a large company like, well-known brand like Cisco. But before you got to Cisco, you had a few stops on the way, which included Telus, BMO, CA, Rogers, which are also big brands in kind of their own right. So what made you decide to go or choose these specific kind of brands? You can quickly highlight, whatever ones you want to touch on, but why did you, decide to choose these roles? And looking back, how did any of these roles kind of really help, get you the role or where you're at today at Cisco? This episode is sponsored by nobody. That's right, nobody. So if you could be kind enough to hit that subscribe button, that would mean a lot to me.
So I'll start, again, because my background was unique and I had a science and a business combination, I actually began my career even before some of the brands that you just listed in health sciences and pharma. My science degree combined with my marketing postgrad actually enabled me to lead with analytics and be really, really comfortable translating, complex products or complex science documentation into creative, customer-facing, physician-facing content. So that's actually how I got my foot in the door, into some really exciting roles. And then at some point, there was actually a little-known company called Clarinet, now called Telus in Canada, that any of your Canadian listeners might remember that name. And they were really disrupting the communication industry, and they were winning marketing awards, again, working with a somewhat unknown agency at that time called Taxi. And so I really wanted, actually, I would say I probably needed, I really needed to be part of that. So I actually applied for a very junior position, less pay, just to get my foot in the tech industry. And that was my first sort of tech. And I was really, really excited to get in. And then the rest of my career path, some of it is just life. Like I mentioned, I had twins. And so while I was at Telus, I had twins, and I was being put forward for some pretty amazing senior leadership roles that were, early in my career, if I think about it from a timing. And I actually made a conscious decision to pause, and I switched to the financial industry for a couple of reasons. One, it gave me an opportunity to increase my scope and my experience in a new industry. And two, financial at that time compared to tech, the pace was a little bit more friendly, family friendly, and I was able to spend more time at home. And, versus work to a national east-west clock, for instance. And so I did that. And then I got a call from a recruiter for Rogers, and they were and Rogers, for those that don't know, is a telecom tech company. They called me and they wanted to actually they wanted someone to help build up the B2B brand marketing practice, leading with digital and performance. And again, that was a bit of a sweet spot for me. And again, my husband and I, we actually sat down, we made a choice for him to be a lead parent, which meant, he does lunches, and there are moments where I miss the school play, and that's okay. And, because he's got it. So that led me to Rogers. And then again, Cisco was another one of those amazing stories of getting a call. And I'll tell you a little bit more about it, if you want to go deep into Cisco, but again, just another wonderful opportunity that came my way. And so back to your point on, and I actually love that the dots being connected when you look back, because I actually think everything is connected when you look back. I probably wouldn't be here doing something I love for a company I love if all of these things didn't happen in my life, looking back.
Yeah, the reason I love it is sometimes when I'm personally like going through thinking back some job experiences that I went through, I hated them when I did it at the time, but now that I've some aspect of that has helped me. Like, for example, I used to do inside sales roles when I was younger. I hated them. You're supposed to dial 100 calls a day. You get a lot of rejection. When you do it all the time, it's repetitive. But then now that I help co-found a startup where we kind of do outbound sales, and we have to make those calls, when somebody says no to me, I kind of laugh, because it's almost like, all right, it's a challenge. Let me figure out how to get you to say yes, versus before I'd be inside crying that, I got 30 no's in a row. So I really love that Steve Jobs looking back, connecting dots, because everything kind of makes you who you are today. I also love the fact that when you talked about your Telus experience, you intentionally, like, even though you could have had a more senior role or applied for one, you took a junior role. And like, so like, what went into that decision making, like to, because I feel like a lot of people would have a problem with ego, like, I have these credentials, I shouldn't be doing this. They should be, if I apply for this, they should be giving me this kind of role. But you were okay with taking a junior role to kind of learn, which I find amazing. Tell us about that.
Um, the reality is it's all context. I was early in my career. I mean, think about it. We're probably all going to be work for at least 50 years. And so there was a contextually, I was in a point in my life where I can take a pay cut, because I had a great support system. I still had a really big runway ahead of me from a career perspective. And I really wanted to get into the tech. I really wanted to be part of a company that was award winning. And so there was a whole bunch of other motivators and support systems that enabled me to make a decision where, I could take a step in a different direction. And I actually use this analogy with my team members when I mentor or coach, and I say, you have to, one way to look at a career is through a ladder where there's a rung and you go one and one and one, you're always constantly climbing. And for me, I look at my career, and I encourage people to look at their career like a monkey bar. And so I don't know if these are Canadian terms, so you have to tell me if I have to explain what a monkey bar is. But a monkey bar is, you see it in the school play yard and it's round and you get to the top, but there's lots of different ways to get to the top. Right. And sometimes you go sideways and sometimes you go down and sometimes, you go, again, so many different ways to go at it. Rock climbing, another analogy, right? But the same idea. And so I always encourage people to look at it through a different lens where it's not necessarily one step on top of each other, but where you sometimes have to move up and down and across to eventually get to where you want to go.
That's great advice. And I do want to delve back into your Cisco conversation where you said, what was said on that phone call, or like when you were kind of in this courting process with Cisco that convinced you to kind of, move over and join the team?
Yeah. So again, and I've shared this story with my colleagues here. I got a call and it was from, California, and I actually thought it was a wrong number and I wasn't quite sure who was calling me. Honestly, it was just one of those amazing opportunities where someone calls and and she shared with me the opportunity. And at that time it was to come and lead the Canada marketing organization for Cisco. And so be the Canada marketing leader. And I said, okay, well, this is really interesting. And then I met at that time with my boss, who walked me through the vision of what they were trying to build at Cisco. I also did a lot of my own work on learning more about the organization, the leadership. And I would say, again, back to point of time in your life, right? The more I got to know Cisco as an organization, not just the role, which was amazing, I was really excited to have the opportunity to join an organization that really represents values that matter to me. And so again, as you think about that, right, that was really important. And it was also, words were like refreshing and empowering, and I saw a future here. But again, back to values, because I really want to talk about that. For me, Cisco was an organization that didn't just talk about the importance of giving back to the community or just talk about increasing diversity. Their leadership team is so actively involved and champions and holds leaders and teams accountable to living these beliefs. And this is, obviously translated into so many wonderful achievements like Best Place to Work for women and young people and diversity and inclusion awards. And so I think that was a really important turning point for me to go and join a company that where I was really just happy and excited, and the values were so much in line with what I wanted to be part of.
You talked about kind of, some of these values that made Cisco very attractive for you, and kind of, you feel welcome, and like, the company's doing that on a very large scale. But I guess maybe earlier in your career, along your kind of journey, as a woman of color, did you ever kind of feel like you hit that proverbial glass ceiling, or just kind of were, treated differently, or potentially just because, you're a woman and you're a woman of color?
Yeah. Yes, full stop, right? I mean, I'll share this interesting stat that I saw from PwC, and it said women still only hold 19% of jobs in the top 10 global tech companies. And this is despite, decades of progress in the workplace. So 15-ish, years ago when I started my career in the tech, it was even lower. And with less representation in leadership positions and almost no women of color in leader roles, even middle management roles, right? So yeah, I mean, like many women in early days of tech, I found myself in lots of situations that caused me to second guess my abilities. I felt like my voice was not heard or my work was diminished. I was looked over for positions that I was qualified for. I was mistook for, while I came in to lead a meeting, someone thought I was the bringing in coffee. Like there's lots of those stories, right? And again, if you want to go here, I'm happy to talk a little bit, but it really came down to having a moment where I thought I'm going to be so much more than what I was told and what people expected me to be. And it really became about overcoming challenges. And, I'm happy to talk about it more or leave it for another part of the conversation. But there was definitely three things that I kind of came to terms with on how I'm going to overcome challenges. And, I've done my best to try and share that with others that want to know more.
Yeah, I would love to hear that. And on top of that as well, now that you have climbed that ladder and you're at a certain position, in a well-known company where you're, where you could potentially have a hand in, giving a hand up to others that look like yourself or other folks that, might have challenges on their own journeys being overlooked or, the same way you have. Would love to kind of hear what you're doing on your end as well, but would love to hear those three things you mentioned before you get into that
Sure.
question. Yeah. Did you know that every time you left a 5 out of 5 review for this podcast, a Tamil parent lets their child pursue a career in the creative arts? Okay, that's probably not true, but if there's a chance that it is, do you really want to jinx it? Leave a review. Do it for the young creative in you.
The first is there's two types of criticism. And there's the criticism and, whether that's going to help you grow and be better and it comes from a really good place. And then I kind of say the second one, you just ignore. And you know which one I'm talking about, right? Like the one where, and again, you as a parent, everyone's going to have an opinion on how you parent your child. Mm-hmm. Everyone's going to have an opinion on how you run your team. I even got opinions on how I need to look like to be taken seriously by an executive. So I think that's the first thing is just know which ones to pay attention, which ones to ignore. The second is really building that strong circle of influence. A lot of people have heard the term of needing a mentor and a sponsor. For me, I actually think you need more than two people. And I think a lot of people believe that now, right? It's more than two people. So for me, when I talk to my team and I do my own sponsorship and coaching conversations, I say, hey, you got to build a circle. You got to build a circle of individuals that are going to support you, accelerate your career, and advocate for you. And so for me as a marketer, my circle of influence will include individuals from sales, marketing, region, and global. And the other benefit of having a circle is they all play different roles, right, for you. And then two, if a champion, if a sponsor, if a mentor leaves the organization, you still have other people that are going to continue to be part of your career journey, right? So I think it's really important to have that circle and really take an honest gauge at, okay, what does my circle look like and where are my gaps? Where are my gaps in my circle? And then last, and you've sort of heard me talk a little bit about making choices and making decisions. And so I've always come with this mindset of not liking the word balance. I actually literally dislike, hate, depending on the spectrum and how I feel at that day. So for me, it's about making choices. It's like stop balancing and just make choices, right? And so you heard me, early in my career, I took a cut. I worked very, very long hours. I worked weekends. I had my kids. And again, I personally made a choice to step back, focus on raising them. And then later, my husband and I made another choice for him to be the lead parent. So I think that's also really important as we think about overcoming challenges and growth is prioritize different things at different times. And then when you make a step, make it a conscious decision, make sure you have support.
I love your advice around the circles, building circles. I mean, it works within kind of internally at a company for the reasons you mentioned, but also building circles, even if those folks do leave and you feel like you're not getting opportunities at the company you're at, you do have people that could be champions or allies at other companies, and that's kind of how you build
Mhm.
your network as well. Do you think that also applies? I have a belief, I mean, it's a common belief, like the people that you surround yourself with, not just professionally but also like in life, like the 5 or 10 closest people
Mhm.
are who you are a byproduct of. Do you believe that, and is that something kind of that you kind of try to take on personally as well outside of work, or is it kind of one and the same because of how involved you are at work and kind of the position you're in?
Uh, yes and no, right? I mean, there's certainly work colleagues that have also become mentors personally, and have become part of my personal life. But at the same time, I do have a core of champions in my personal life, and whether that is my husband who plays a role as both champion and support, or a girlfriend that I've known for 20 years that I grew up with that has a different role that they play, or a parent, that is helps me out again from a support system. Um, I think to your point on, yes, you do need a support system outside of work, only because they may play different roles for you. And then two, the combination of five, I don't know. I actually don't know. I've certainly heard that as well. Like you are at the end of the day, you're the combination of five people. The only reason I say I don't know is when I look at, especially on my personal side, when I look at the people I'm surrounded with, they have such diversity. And there are people, friends and groups that probably don't even know each other and come from very different backgrounds and things like that. So I don't know what that actually makes me. Maybe that is a good thing, and maybe that means I'm actually a multiplier of all of them. But I do have a pretty diverse group outside of work that come from all sorts of backgrounds and bring a lot of diversity to my life.
Interesting. Yeah, and I guess now that when I was saying it out loud, I guess the way I take the 5 to 10 people around you and kind of they impact you in some way is when I see a particular trait of someone that I know, or like I see and it's like amazing, something I don't have. I like to kind of, I've heard this before somewhere as well, like steal those kind of traits and kind of internalize it as best we can. So if somebody's a really good public speaker, I try to be like, okay, how do
Yeah.
I be a little bit better there? Somebody's really good at just dealing with people, steal that.
Mm.
So okay. I realize we kind of have been talking and talking about this amazing role that you've been doing at Cisco as the head of global partner marketing, but I actually haven't asked you to define what exactly you do and what your day looks like. So why don't I give you a chance to do that, and then that'll hopefully give people more context in terms of what a potential senior marketing role at a large company could look like.
Yeah, that's actually a good question and a good point too, bringing it back. So my day, and it's probably the part of my role that I also love, is it varies. I get to lead an amazing team of 60 plus marketers that focus on basically how do we, from a Cisco perspective, support our partner marketing community, both internally, whether it is across all the countries we operate in, or externally, all the partners that rely and we work with from a Cisco perspective, so both internal and external network. If I boil it down to 5 areas of focus that my team and we focus and we lead in, it's about simplifying the experience. We want to make sure from a Cisco perspective, we're really simplifying the partner experience. We invest a lot in educating and investing, education. And when I think about education, I think about it from a perspective of we have a large marketing community that support our partners. And look at COVID, everything went digital. Okay, so how do we enable every manager, every marketing leader that has to work with a partner to lead through a digital lens? We also even brought some of our training, like social media and et cetera, to our external partner community, so we can help them upskill and up level and be marketers of the future. In a global role, and this is number 3, I would say, and I'm really coming to really appreciate, but also the accountability is, you got to take things from a global and you got to scale it. you got to scale it across all the countries, your network. And so a lot of what we're doing is figuring out how do we scale and reach more people and more customers and more partners. Ultimately, I'm on the hook to drive demand, right? You talked about B2B. I mean, at the end of the day, we got to drive demand. We got to drive interest. We got to drive pipeline. We got to, I mean, all the basic, sort of functions of marketing. And the last is it's around transformation, and so we're investing in new routes. How customers buy are changing. They expect more, and that means our partners expect more. So there's definitely an effort on from a transformation perspective, so that we can reach new customers and new generations of people that want to work with us and transact with us. So yeah, I mean, what I do is any one of those things at any given day, and sometimes all of that in a day, right? Building programs and yeah.
One of the things I've heard kind of in the B2B tech space is any new company that starts in the future will be content centric first, and then kind of product later, or product second, meaning the future of kind of building and driving demand will really revolve around content. Is that something that you're seeing from a Cisco point of view? Even though Cisco is, it might not be easy to define for a lot of people like what Cisco does because of all the lines of products and business that you guys do. But is that something you see as well? Like content has become increasingly kind of important to kind of tell the story of Cisco, tell demand, create demand, differentiate yourself from others. Tell us about that.
I would say you need both. I think at the end of the day, we do have some of the best in class solutions. We are transforming and have transformed to be a software-led company. And so when you think about it from that context, the solutions at the end of the day that any organization needs to offer their customers need to be the best of the best, right? And so having said that, you could tell great stories and great content, but if you can't back it up with the right products and solutions, I don't know how impactful that will be, and you'll lose credibility really quickly. Having said that, I think there's also the combination of really, and this is where the marketing role is, personalized content, right? So what you might need as a small business owner from a technology solution might be very different from what a big bank, a CIO of a bank is going to need. And so I think the role of marketing is to ensure from a content perspective that, we can personalize and offer you what you need and have the right value proposition for you from a product and solution that may be very different from a big business. So I'm cheating a little bit by saying both.
And when you just kind of described, the 5 things or the 5 major kind of deliverables or things you're responsible for, what percentage of your role or day would you say is more dedicated to managing or empowering people versus kind of in the weeds, kind of implementation or vision creation for the things you have to do? What percentage would you say? I'm imagining a lot more people empowerment, but I would just want to hear from you. Money can be hard to come by, but here's a $100 opportunity for you. Join my free newsletter for free exclusive content and a free chance to win $100 when I hold special draws. Did I mention that it's free?
Absolutely. I have an amazing team of leaders. And I see my biggest role is to make sure as a leader team, I'm helping them, whether that's removing roadblocks, making sure there's clarity, building a healthy team, especially during the pandemic. That's where, I also enjoy spending most of my time on those elements, and also connecting dots across the senior leadership across Cisco. I have lots of smart people that are, doing all really good hard work, to be honest.
I feel like you make it sound easy, but I feel like finding and empowering people is such a hard thing to do. Not a lot of people are maybe good at it, or not as many people that should be are good at it. So how was there any kind of special training or books or resources you kind of had to consume or relate to kind of get better, or I guess level up to kind of be able to handle what you have to handle for your job?
Yeah, I don't even know how to answer that, only because there's no playbook, right? There's no playbook that says, congratulations, you are now a leader. Um, I wish there was times, for me, I worked with some amazing leaders, and I learn from the best of the leaders. I spend as much time as I can one-on-one with my own team to understand what is their motivators and what support they need. Um, and I'll also say that I'm also not perfect, right? And I'm very, very open to say, hey, give me feedback. Give me feedback when I've done great things, but also give me feedback when I've let you down. And so to me, it's an evolution. I always say being a leader is the hardest work. It's also the work that I will continuously be learning how to be better at.
I love the honesty. So for me, I'm a big fan of asking people, I don't like the word, but failure, aka learning lesson. But for you, what's like a failure or learning lesson that you've experienced in, say, the last 3 to 5 years? And like, what did you learn from that experience?
So like you, I'm also not a fan of the word failure. So I'm not going to use that word. For me, it's about lessons. So exactly to what you just said, I've learned a lot of lessons over the last few years. And I'll say one of it has actually been very personal. And my personal lesson, which tied it a little bit to work, is I have always been a very busy person. I've loved the busyness of life. I've always loved thinking about the next and the next and the next. And again, a great lesson that the pandemic taught me is to appreciate savoring the moment, appreciate savoring the now, appreciate this conversation that I'm having with you, right? And the fact that you asked me to be part of this conversation. So really, really appreciating these moments. It could even be, a summer day with the kids, or putting my phone aside when it's time to put them to bed. So it's all of those moments. Even I again, during the pandemic and being virtual, it's the one-on-one conversations with the coworker. So yeah, so I think that's where I've lesson learned is less busy and more in the moment.
If you had a chance to go back in a time machine and visit 16-year-old Luxy, what would you tell her?
I would say you're going to be a lot more than what you believe you can be. I would say it's okay to own the power to define your path, your career. It's okay to define what kind of mother, wife, friend you want to be.
You mentioned kind of during COVID, a lot of patterns and behaviors change. Like for myself, one habit that I picked up is walking and listening to a podcast every day for like an hour. And it's like just been ingrained now. So for you, during COVID, or just maybe in the last, like, even before that, what's like a new belief, behavior, or habit that you kind of picked up that's really benefited your life?
You know what? It actually ties back to our previous conversation. And like it really came to life during the pandemic. And it's back to the choosing an organization that represents values that matter. We spend so much of our time at work with our colleagues, with our leaders, with our teams. And especially during the pandemic when things were hard, right? Things were hard for all of us, and our home and our work life blurred. I was so happy to be part of an organization by leadership that really led with empathetic leadership, that really allowed me to focus on home when I needed to focus on home, that really stood up for inclusion, especially with some of the things that were happening in other parts of the world. So you know what, it was really wonderful to be part of a company and a workspace that not only improved my life, but also just brought me joy at work, and especially on the hard days, right? Especially on the hard days.
Well, that's kind of a good segue into kind of the last part of our discussion today. It's a fun game exercise I like to call Creator Confessions. So basically, it's kind of a bunch of very short statements, and then you're going to kind of say the first answer that pops into mind. You ready, Luxy?
I think so. Now you're making me nervous.
They're easy, don't worry. Favorite Tamil food?
Fish curry.
Something that scares you?
Getting bored.
Insecurity that you have?
Oh my God, these are hard. Not having enough time for my kids.
Favorite TV show you're watching?
I don't watch TV. It's actually embarrassing, but I don't.
It's actually no, it's actually a great thing because I've been trying to cut down on my TV time. A place you're itching to travel to after this pandemic is over.
Oh my God, where do I start? So we canceled Portugal, which I'm really, really sad because we were supposed to do Portugal and the Azores Island.
I love Portugal. Yes, I've only been there once. Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to rebook that trip soon.
A fellow Tamil creator that you want to give a shout out to.
You.
I'll take it. Thank you. Favorite childhood memory?
You know what? I'm literally having such a mashup of so many things going through my brain that I can't even think about one moment.
No problem. You had a fun childhood then. What do you like to do for fun outside of work? One thing.
I love biking with my kids.
What's a purchase you've splurged on in the last couple of years recently that you have zero regret about?
A really expensive purse that I've been eyeing on.
Pet peeve of yours?
People that find problems and not solutions.
Same here. If you knew that you were going to die tomorrow, a regret that you would have?
Dude, this is hard.
Maybe I find it easy because I ask these questions.
Oh, I gotta I'm gonna stay up all night thinking about that one. Honestly, I don't have regrets. I hate to say that, but I really don't. I think life is just, it's a series of things and it's all meant to be.
A celebrity whose life you'd want to experience for one day.
I also don't follow celebrities.
That's okay. Not a bad thing.
I am the most boring person you're gonna meet.
No, not at all. That's your counterculture. I love meeting people like that. And finally, public service announcement you want to leave our audience with. So just like final thoughts or like just things on your mind that somebody listening to, whether it's someone that's a young person aspiring to be someone like yourself in the world of marketing, or just a young woman out there that is kind of trying to figure out her next steps. Any pieces of advice or thoughts for them?
I'm going to turn around. My advice is going to be for creators like you.
Okay.
And I would say, keep telling stories that are non-traditional. I love that you, and I had a chance to look at some of the stories you've created, and I love that they are non-traditional. And by what I mean, and you're probably seeing this in our communities, we are slow to change. And I think creators like you, by telling non-traditional stories, can start to normalize new things. And whether that is everything from finding love outside of the Tamil community, non-traditional definitions of marriage, even leaning into political differences, because through understanding them, we actually become better. So that would be my thing, is keep doing what you're doing, and don't be afraid to go out and tell some of those stories that people are maybe afraid to talk about.
Wonderful. That's a great way to kind of end off the podcast today. Luxy, you were wonderful to talk to. Really excited to kind of share your story. If someone's listened to this podcast and has been kind of inspired by our conversation and want to reach out for advice or just to connect, what would be the best way for someone to reach out to you?
So you can follow me on LinkedIn or on Twitter at LuxyTHU, and connect with me on social.
Awesome. And for those of you listening, thank you guys so much for listening as always, and look forward to the next episode.